Once upon a time, Gautam Buddha had a follower named Chakshupal. Now, Chakshu means eyes, but the interesting thing is that Chakshupal was blind. He had a strong desire to meet Buddha, so he went to a place called Jaitwan. After arriving there, he paid his respects to Gautam Buddha and decided to stay in a hermitage, which is like a peaceful place for meditation. One night, Chakshupal was walking outside his room in the hermitage. Instead of just walking, he was practicing a special type of meditation called walking meditation. However, because he was blind, he couldn't see what was on the ground as he walked. Unfortunately, while he was walking, he accidentally stepped on some ants, crushing them. The next morning, when the other followers of Buddha passed by Chakshupal's room and saw the dead ants, they began to criticize him, saying that he had done something wrong, something that created bad karma. The disciples who saw the dead ants went to Buddha to complain about Chakshupal. They told Buddha what had happened. In response, Buddha asked them a question. Did you personally see Chakshupal crushing the ants with your own eyes? The disciples admitted that they hadn't seen Chakshupal crushing the ants themselves. However, they pointed out that all the dead ants were found in front of Chakshupal's room, so they believed he must have done it. Buddha then explained that just as the disciples hadn't seen Chakshupal crushing the ants, Chakshupal, being blind, hadn't seen those ants walking on the ground. So Buddha said that Chakshupal was not guilty of any wrongdoing. Buddha also shared an important lesson with the disciples. He told them that Chakshupal had reached a state of enlightenment, and someone who has achieved enlightenment would not harm or have violent feelings towards any living being. Therefore, they should trust in Chakshupal's peaceful intentions. Buddha's disciples wanted to know why Chakshupal, who was enlightened, was blind in this life. In response, Buddha shared a story about Chakshupal's past life. In his previous life, Chakshupal was a highly skilled physician. He treated people using herbal medicines, and his treatments were so effective that people would quickly recover after taking his medicines. One day, a woman approached him for treatment because she had lost her eyesight due to an eye disease. She had lost all hope of ever regaining her sight. When she went to Chakshupal, she made a promise to him. She said that if he could completely cure her eyes, allowing her to see again, she would become his servant for the rest of her life, along with her children. In the story, Chakshupal gave the woman some eye ointment, and over time, her eyes started to get better and she could see again. She began to think that if she kept using the ointment for a few more days, her eyes would become perfect and her eye problem wouldn't return. However, she was scared because she had promised to become Chakshupal's servant for life if her eyes were cured. So, out of fear of keeping that promise, she lied to Chakshupal, saying her eyes weren't getting better and she needed more medicine. Chakshupal was smart and knew that his medicine always worked well for eye problems. Chakshupal realized that the woman didn't want to keep her promise of becoming his servant for life, and that's why she was pretending not to be cured. Out of anger and spite, he gave her a different ointment that made her blind for the rest of her life. This act of harming someone on purpose created bad karma for Chakshupal, and as a result, he had to be born blind in his next life. After sharing this story, Buddha told his disciples that all our actions and tendencies originate from our thoughts and intentions. If someone does something with bad intentions, they will eventually face sorrow as a result of their actions. This sorrow will stay with them, much like how a cart follows a bullock. On the other hand, if a person performs good deeds with good intentions, happiness will follow them, much like how the cart follows a bullock when it's moving. When the disciples heard this story, they understood the concept of karma, the idea that our actions have consequences. Many of them gained enlightenment after listening to Buddha's teachings on that day. If we look at our lives, we can see that everything we experience, whether it's good or bad, has its origins in our actions. This is the law of karma, which means that what you sow, you reap. If you do good deeds, you'll experience happiness, but if you engage in bad deeds, you'll face sorrow. The most crucial factor in karma is our intention behind our actions, because it determines whether an action is good or bad. For instance, consider a robber who stabs someone with a knife to steal from them, and a doctor who uses a knife to perform surgery to save a patient's life. They both use a knife to cut, but their intentions are different. This makes one's action bad karma and the other's good karma. So, always act with a good intention in mind. If you make a mistake unknowingly and without bad intentions, it's not a sin. Like in the story, Chakshupal accidentally crushed ants under his feet, but he didn't do it with bad intentions. We all make both good and bad choices in our lives, and we all make mistakes. What matters most is the purity of our intentions. If your intentions are pure, even a mistaker can be forgiven. However, if your intentions are impure, you will have to face the consequences. Before you take any action, you have the freedom to choose, but once you've done it, you're bound to experience the results of that action, and you can't change it. That's why it's essential to be careful and consider the consequences before you act, because what you put out into the world comes back to you, whether it's good or bad.